I'm Mia Gallupo, and thank you for joining us for The Hollywood Reporter Presents an exclusive Q&A with the filmmakers and cast of Cherry. And here are the filmmakers and cast of Cherry. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Joe and Anthony, just starting with both of you, I'm wondering, what was it about Nico Walker's original story that made you both want it to be the first feature you tackled after exiting the Marvel Universe?
Well, we grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and Cleveland really is on the front lines of the opioid crisis right now. Lots of parts of the industrial Midwest are. We have family members that have died from overdoses, others who are struggling with sobriety. It's a very personal story for us. And when we read the book, the thing that struck us the most was his voice was very authentic. There was this self-loathing mixed with a self-awareness and intelligence and street poet soul, and sort of all these things that reminded us of friends and family that we had back home who were going through the same existential crisis that he was in the book. And the level of detail and the authenticity with which he wrote it. There's also, too, that, you know, the author Nico grew up in the same neighborhoods that we did. I worked at the same restaurant he did, 10 years apart from each other. So we grew up in the same circles that he did and had a very different outcome. And we wanted to go back and honor that story and deal with this issue and try to, you know, make a film that would stir up conversation around, you know, drug addiction, treatment of soldiers, veterans, treatment of veterans. And we just felt there was a lot there to talk about.
And Tom, what was your first impression of the story, and did you have any apprehensions about playing Cherry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be a little strange if I didn't. I'm always up for a challenge in everything that I do in life. From everything that I do as an actor, I'm always looking for that next challenge, that next step to progress as an actor. I'm just really lucky that I got to take such a big one with this film while having the safety blanket of Joe and Anthony. Because obviously I'd worked with them before and I trusted them and I knew that they had my best interests at heart and would look after me. But yeah, I was nervous and there was moments where I wasn't sure that I was the guy for the job because I didn't think that I could do or portray a character like this. But with the right level of support, with the right teammate, which is Ciara, and the right amount of research, we were able to kind of figure out how we were going to do this and how we were going to tackle this film. And I'm really proud of it and really proud of all of us. It was an amazing process and one that I'm so glad that I was a part of.
And Ciara, how did you come to the story, and what was that audition process like? You're coming into a very established filmmaking dynamic between Tom, Joe, and Anthony, so what was it like jumping into that?
I came across this script, this audition, the same way I do all, which is through an email by my agent, and they've heard this before now, but as soon as I saw the three of their names on this breakdown, I was like, oh man, this is so out of my league. There's no way I'm going to be a part of this movie. But I fell in love with the sides, and I really fell in love with the script and seeing these characters and their ability to, you know, laugh in the face of tragedy to survive, but it still felt like a very honest and real telling of the story. I very much so wanted to be a part of it. But it's intimidating. Of course it's intimidating coming into a group that's, you know, so well established. I mean, Tom grew up with Joe and Anthony and, you know, they're such close friends, but it was a really welcoming atmosphere and I felt immediately like they had my back and I felt like a part of the team as well, which has made it so much easier to tackle these scenes that we had to do.
Yeah. And the book, the Nico Walker's original book, is very much so from Cherry's point of view, and it offers the interiority of the male character. I'm wondering, how did you go about building out Emily's story as something separate from that when you didn't have that source material for that interiority?
The script was very, very helpful for me in that. The script is one step away from the book, and the characters were far more fleshed out than they were in the book, but they still are seen through the eyes of Cherry. But you know, I approached this script the way I do most scripts and saw it as sort of a puzzle and looked for the pieces hidden within the dialogue and within the stage direction to figure out who Emily was as a person, and then drawing upon people that I had known in my life and met through my research to turn her into more of a fully realized person.
And Tom and Ciara, what was that research process like? This book deals with the opioid epidemic and the Iraq War and so many other facets of life in the 2000s. I'm wondering, what did you all go through as prep for this movie?
It was quite extensive, and also very important to, making this film authentic. When you're telling a story about real people's lives and events, you have a certain level of responsibility to do justice to that story. So the more people we spoke to and the more information we got, the better. I went to the VA in Cleveland and sat down with probably about 30 different people who were all veterans. They were all suffering from PTSD. They were all suffering from substance abuse. And I just interviewed them and I asked them questions, and some of them really didn't want to talk to me and some of them really did want to talk to me. The one thing that I learned, which was so valuable for me while making this film, is that once you're hooked on heroin, the only thing you think about is getting more heroin. And that was such a valuable piece of information for me to give my character drive in every single scene. But I couldn't have made this film without the men and women that I spoke to. So I'm very grateful to them that they were so open. And it made the film so much better because I knew very little about this problem, this invisible problem that's on our doorstep. So I really educated myself, and as I said, I'm very, very grateful to all the people I spoke to for opening up and sharing their stories.
And Ciara, what about for you? I know you mentioned research, but what did that look like?
Yeah, well, the battle of addiction is a battle that's very much so fought in the shadows. So unless it's something that you've gone through personally or you have a loved one that's gone through it, it's hard to know the true ugly details of battling addiction. And I was lucky enough to have a rehab facility in Cleveland open up their doors to me. And I got to speak to many of their outpatients there, those who felt comfortable sharing their story. I never wanted to pressure anyone into telling me things that they didn't want to tell, because at different stages of recovery, you've come to accept and be comfortable with sharing that story. There was one nurse in particular that I spoke to who I owe so much. She had a strikingly similar journey to Emily's. And I think through speaking to her, I was able to learn these details that you just don't know unless you've gone through it yourself. The way that you look at yourself in the mirror, if you can look at yourself in the mirror, the way you look at your partner at the different stages of your addiction, what changes with your habits that you develop, picking at your skin, or, the way that you dress. Without their help, I know I wouldn't have been able to do half the job that I did with this film.
Can you remember, Ciara? I only remembered this the other day, and I can't believe I forgot about it. Do you remember when Brian, we had a consultant on set who was a former addict, and he now works at a rehab center. He sat us down, and basically we had every single prop that you could imagine, and he just taught us how to cut heroin, how to cook heroin, how to put it in the syringe. And I remember sitting there, and it was so alien to me. I cannot imagine doing that to myself. And then as the film went on and we sort of fell into these characters and built these characters, it started to become a reality, and I could see how people fall into this terrible habit. And to have him on set every day was so valuable. I mean, he really helped us make this film very authentic and very truthful from a sort of practical standpoint.
Right, he was wonderful. I remember there was two people, Brian and one girl that I spoke to at the rehab facility, who mentioned that in seeing dope sickness in film, we see people throwing up all the time, but we never see the other side. She was like, the women, it's always like, oh, I'm dope sick, and you throw up. But she's like, we never see them, pardon my French, shit your pants. She's like, you shit your pants when you're dope sick. She's like, I want to see that level of authenticity and reality in a film. And I think through learning that, we spoke to the brothers, and we made sure to add that into the scene. But yeah, Brian was like, okay, no, when you come into this, this is urgent.
Yeah.
Having him there to keep us in line and correct us was extraordinarily valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. And Joe and Anthony, going off of that, how did you want to visually portray addiction? Ciara mentioned that it's shown a certain way on screen traditionally in a lot of features. So how did you want Cherry's portrayal of addiction on screen to be different?
Well, it felt to us that the virtue here was its sort of truthfulness to how the drugs were being used today, how opioids specifically were being used today. And it was very important to us not to fall into old preconceptions that we all have, that, like Ciara was talking about how this stuff is portrayed traditionally. We wanted to really, we knew it was a new phenomenon. We knew it was very unique in terms of the way the drugs are being obtained, what the drugs are, how they're being used, by whom, all different. So we wanted to be very authentic with that and very truthful and very grounded. Our approach was not to romanticize it at all. We did want to balance the film because, again, we want people to be able to watch this movie, even though it's about complicated things. And I think on some level, these are very important things. We didn't want the movie to feel like it was trying to sort of teach or instruct or anything like that. We wanted the film to be fun, entertaining, engaging, exciting, surprising. Mm-hmm. So finding that balance was very important, but we didn't want to ever dip into sentimentality or romanticism on our road to that. And it was a very hardcore dedication to sort of keeping things grounded, keeping things real, and being open to what that meant in this world today.
And I know you both mentioned your personal connection in terms of place for this movie. How important was it for both of you to film on location in Ohio?
Critically. I mean, it's having grown up there, we have an emotional attachment to certain locations. The house that they lived in was a block and a half from the house that we grew up in. The restaurant that Cherry works in the movie is the restaurant that I worked at. It's the same restaurant that Nico worked at. So there's a lot of detail that we can bring to the film that was about our experience growing up there that we can translate, and about Nico's experience growing up there and what he translated into the novel. So ultimately what we're trying to do, and we've talked about this in other interviews, is that this is one in a million stories. This isn't a unique story. There are millions of people dealing with stories like this, and that, at the opening of the film, when the camera comes down the street to find that one house, this is happening to your family and your friends and your neighbors, and you either know about it or you don't know about it, but it's there, and it's there in a very dramatic way. And that's why it was critical to go back to Cleveland, because it's really it's the most organic connection to what we think is the front lines of this crisis, the industrial Midwest, this existential blight that's gripping that part of the country. And so there was incredible authenticity in being there, and we could bring authenticity to it, to our experiences growing up there and our experiences with family and friends there who were dealing with addiction.
And Tom and Ciara, I'm wondering, how was it filming on location for each of you? How does that add to your performance when you're actually in the space that the story is occupying?
I mean, Cleveland is a massive character in this film, and for us, in some of the parts that we some of the places where we were shooting, you really felt like the problem and the story in which we were telling could be happening in that house across the street, So it was really valuable to sort of bringing this to life. And I think there was something about us being in Cleveland. There was something about the fact that it was your hometown, and that we were kind of felt like we were in this little bubble, and we felt like a family. It really, really helped me. Like, for example, if we'd shot this film in LA, it would have been very different. It would have been a very different quality of life while we were making this film. So I think it was really valuable to sort of, again, making this film incredibly authentic and making it truthful.
Right. Shooting there, I think, fully immersed us in both the story and the experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for all of you, how is it to be releasing Cherry during a pandemic that has only seen an increase in the opioid epidemic and overdoses? What are your hopes for the movie?
And that was certainly part of our motivation to make the movie now, was because the opioid epidemic is still unfolding and still raging and still hasn't been controlled. And 2020 saw the highest number of opioid overdose deaths ever. So we're, it's just tragically, it's more relevant than ever, and we're just chasing it. But that was the initial inclination, to make the movie and make it now. because it is ongoing, because it does have to do with veterans issues and the fact that veterans aren't being taken care of properly when they finish their service. These are all very timely issues that hopefully the movie can catalyze more of a dialogue around, more of an understanding around, and sort of contribute in some small way toward advancing these things forward to a better place for all of us.
Thank you all so much for taking the time, and thank you for joining us for the Hollywood Reporter Presents screening series.
Thank you, Mia.
Thank you, Mia.
Thank you, Mia.
Thank you, Mia.